Hey, what's up everyone? Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk to you about choosing your hunting arrows and hopefully making this pretty technical topic a little clearer and hopefully more simple. So media, advertising and price all play a big part in which brand of arrows we're drawn to, and that's quite fine. But the most important thing is that we believe in the arrows that we pick. There's also a lot of people or companies who tell you that your arrow has to have certain attributes like 650 grains or a certain diameter, thickness, or it's just not going to work on your intended quarry. And that's not quite accurate. Excuse the pun. There's definitely qualities that you want to try and build into your arrows, but there's no hard and fast rules. Now if we look at traditional bow hunters and how they build their arrows, we can learn a lot. So traditional bows don't have anywhere near the speed of a compound bow, but they still manage to take down some pretty big game, even up to an elephant. And the way they achieve that is heavy arrows and normally a two-blade, fixed blade, solid broadhead. So there was a very extensive study done by Dr. Ed Ashby quite a while ago. This is his book, which is not that old. You don't need his book to get all the info on the study. You can look it up online, Ed Ashby's files or studies, something like that. And he gives you some very good information on what makes a bone-splitting, super-penetrating arrow and broadhead combination. There's also some videos on YouTube where he visually shows you how these things work, and they do work. Most of this information points towards a very heavy, stiff-spined and specific shape of a two-blade, fixed blade broadhead. But that's not always the best broadhead or arrow combination for the job. So how do we find the arrow that's right for us? Well, I can tell you this: if you're hunting dangerous game, anything like Cape buffalo, giraffe, anything with a thick hide, hippo, something like that, you need to build an arrow specific for that animal, or you're going to end up with a very long walk or something even worse. So let's start looking at arrow spine. So you probably know what spine is. When they build the arrows in the factory, they have a test ring with set parameters and a set weight in the middle, and they measure how much the arrow bends or flexes. So that is the static spine. The second way of measuring spine is about your dynamic spine. So that, simply put, if you have a really heavy bow, you know, your 80, 90 pound huge bows, obviously when you fire that arrow, it's going to flex this shaft more than if you were with a lighter bow. So there's part of it. But the weight of your broadhead and your inserts and stuff also plays a part. The more weight you have up front, the more force I need to push it, and the more resistance, and the more it will flex. So when you look at the charts that you might see on Eastern or Gold Tip websites, and they say your bow's 70 pounds and your draw length is this and that, and your 125 grain broadhead, this is the spine of arrow you need, that's a very, very rough way of looking at it. There's a lot more that plays into it. And the best way to get the correct information you need is by one of the computer programs like Software for Archers, and I'm not paid or anything by them at all, but I use Software for Archers, and it gives you everything you need down to a little spine graph, and it'll show you if that spine is in the sweet zone or it's a little too stiff or a little too weak. And that's a great way of choosing the perfect arrow spine. So you might ask, well, why do I need to get the perfect arrow spine? Well, I'll tell you this: there's never a perfect arrow spine. With the way that arrows are cut to length for your draw length, and or maybe what they can do in the shop, you know, they can only get it down to full inches or maybe half an inch, and the weights of the broadheads that we have, the poundage of your bow, you're never going to get a perfect arrow spine, but you will get something that's pretty close in the middle there. And it all comes down to what you have available to you. You know, do you have weight systems where you can add 5 or 10 grain weights in the inserts, or you know, are your arrows just a normal insert and you can't add any weight in there? So all of those parts affect your arrow spine, and don't be afraid if you cannot find the perfect arrow spine. There's nothing that's perfect. One of the reasons we want the arrow spine to be correct or in the good zone is you don't want this arrow shattering when you take a shot and all these bits of sharp carbon end up in your little scratches. That's going to be a bad day. The other reason is so that the arrow, as it flexes, can absorb as much of the energy from that bowstring as possible and take it into the shot or into your target. You don't want it to flex too much or it's wasting a whole bunch of energy there. You don't want to be too stiff or it's just not going to work effectively. So the other thing you hear people talking about is F.O.C or forward of center. Well, that's simple. You measure the balance point of your arrow compared to the exact middle in terms of its length, and obviously the balance point is changed by how much weight you put on the front. So the more weight you put on the front, the more forward of center that balance point is going to be. Now, we don't need to know why, but trust me, arrows with a high forward of center weight are more accurate, they're going to group better, and they are going to penetrate better as well, which is the important thing for us. So the last consideration I had taken into account is the diameter of the arrow. So again, this comes down to what's available on the market and what you can afford and what you like. But you clearly get some pretty thin arrows out there, and you get some pretty thick ones as well. People will also tell you that if it has this tapered shaft, it's going to do a better job because it makes a larger hole that's punching in when it opens up, and then a thinner tail is going to slide through better. I don't buy that too much because most of the time when they say it's a tapered arrow shaft, they just mean it's fatter at the end than your average arrow, and that's just not working for me. But definitely a thin arrow is going to penetrate easier than a thicker arrow. Simple as that. So in the end, there's only a few variables. One, you can change the poundage of your bow to match the spine of your arrow. You can change the spine of your arrow to match the poundage of your bow. You can also change the length of your arrow to increase or decrease the dynamic spine of the arrow, and you can change the weight that you have at the end of your arrow. Okay, so here we are at the technical or scientific or technology side of all the things. This software is called Software for Archers. There's probably many different brands out there, but this is the one that I found, very reasonably priced, and it does everything and more than I need. So it's pretty simple. What you do is enter everything that you know about your setup, the bow, the arrows, the point weights that you're using, all that good stuff, and it gives you a reading or a pretty accurate actually estimate of the speed that you're going to get and the arrow weight from all the specs that you're putting in. And you can obviously adjust this and put in a manual weight if you want to, or manual speeds if you've got that through a chronograph, and then it'll calculate good things like the energy, momentum. F.O.C, it gives you a good idea, but I've found if you want a more accurate F.O.C, it's better to measure it on the actual arrow. I don't think that this program knows how long your broadheads are and different things like that. So anyway, but it gives you a good idea of what's what. So what I've got up here is something that's pretty common, popular, set of arrows, and the bow that I'm using at the moment, the Hoyt Carbon RX1 Turbo, and it's set up to how I have it right now. The main point of this program is to show you if your arrow is spined correctly for your bow. So once you put all your good information in there, and it can also print out sight tapes if that's the type of sight that you're using. So you got all your information in, and you go over to spine match, and would you look at that? So 300 is a spine that's probably a little bit stiffer than most people use. A lot of guys use 340, and there you can see it's well into the weak side of things, and it'll give you obviously what the static spine is and the dynamic. That is, if I explained all this correctly, what the arrow is flexing to once it's been shot, with all the weights of your points and all that good stuff on there. So you can see you might be happy shooting it there. I'm not. I would want it to be in the good, or if anything, slightly into the stiff side. So here we go. After much looking around and picking and choosing, the arrows that I went for are the Gold Tip Platinum Pierce. Gold Tips been around for a very long time. They know what they're doing. Or Pierce Platinum, that's what it is. The spine is 250. You've got quite a bit of extra grains per inch, so the arrow is nice and heavy. Let's get the Gold Tip Fletching in there. Some of these things like the Fletching, they're all very similar in weight, so it's not going to change much on the speed. Actually, I think I've got the GT3. They're very, very similar. What else? Put the Gold Tip knock in there. And I think it is just a GT knock. There we go. Apply that. Alrighty, let me just see. This looks a little high. I'm pretty sure my arrow is not going to be that quick. Let's see the spine match. Okay, looks kind of correct. There we go. So this is where it's different. The good thing about the Gold Tip, you can add weights into your insert, and I've chosen to add weight. I won't bore you with all the details, but it gets up to a weight of about 64 grains. So 64 grains, and it's right on the good, if anything a fraction over into the stiff side. So that's given me a total arrow weight of about 502 grains. As I said, it's normally pretty accurate. 502 grains at 900, that would be amazing. 294 feet per second, that's plenty. If anything, this program is a little ambitious. We might round it down to 290. That's still plenty of kinetic energy and momentum and all the rest. So that's what I use to work out the arrow that I'm picking, and now we're going to go and build it.